Welcome to the Library of Congress, and welcome to our special guests, Joan Nathan and Michael Twitty. Yoram will make sort of proper introductions in a minute. First, quick show of hands. How many people are new or relatively new to the Library of Congress here this morning, this afternoon? How many rather familiar with the Library of Congress? All right, about 50-50. So I want to provide a little quick overview of the library for those of you who are new, and appreciate you joining us for this particular event. And also for those who are more familiar with the library, you can tell me what you think about the little overview of a place you're more familiar with. We are many libraries under one roof: a national library, a preeminent research library, a congressional library. But above all, I think we aspire to be a library for all. A place that is welcoming to all, encourages more people from more walks of life to visit us on site and online and use our many resources and services. And today's program is courtesy of the Libraries of Break section in our African and Middle Eastern division. And the section is, I think, a great example of how you and anybody you care to tell, and please tell, can engage with the Library of Congress, both on site and online. The break section itself includes a wide range of materials, more than 300,000 as it happens, in Hebrew and other Jewish languages, covering topics such as biblical studies, rabbinics, Jewish law, music, folklore, poetry, language, and history. With an expansive collection of rare books, manuscripts, and historical documents, the section is a vital resource for those studying or simply curious about Jewish heritage and culture from antiquity to modern times. Recently, we digitized and made available, free and online, hundreds of manuscripts written in Hebrew and in cognate languages such as Judeo-Arabic, Judeo-Persian, and Yiddish. And these, along with many other resources also available online, offer a rich and often intimate glimpse into Jewish life over the centuries. Yoram and his team also provide live programming, and today's is a perfect example, and others are forthcoming. Additionally, I encourage you, while you're in the building, to visit our new Treasures Gallery on the second floor. This exhibition draws from the library's rich holdings of Americana and international collections, bringing together a mix of voice recordings, moving images, diaries, manuscripts, photographs, art, maps, books, and more. And in all of these endeavors, the library is constantly exploring how culture preserves memory. We look to actively preserve collective memories representing entire societies, important moments in history, and individual lives. And we look to reach more communities from more backgrounds with our work, to engage with it and to help us shape it. And what better way to engage with culture and memory than through the topic of food and family? So with that, I'll hand it over to Yoram to make proper introductions. Enjoy the interview. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Eugene. Good afternoon. My name is Yoram Bitton, and I am the Hebraic section head. And thank you for joining us today at the Library of Congress. The Hebraic section at the African and Middle East Division is pleased to welcome you to this exciting event. Today, we are honored to have Joan Nathan with us. Joan, known as the Queen of Jewish Cooking, needs little introduction. The author of dozen books, she has done more than any other cookbook author to bring Jewish and Israeli cooking to American kitchens. She has won numerous prizes and awards, including the prestigious James Beard Award and the Julia Child International Association of Cooking Professional Awards multiple times, among others. Joan was the producer and host of 2 award-winning PBS documentaries and is known as the preeminent authority on Jewish cooking in America. Her new book, My Life in Recipes, Food, Family, and Memories, has just been released to glowing reviews. And her next book, A Sweet Year, Jewish Celebrations and Festive Recipes for Kids and Their Families, will be released in November. Despite her significant accomplishment and career success, Joan is an example of humility and kindness. And I put there the New York Times piece to read later. As Sarah Wildman recently wrote in her New York Times opinion piece titled "John Nathan Taught Me to Show Up and Bring a Dish," she speaks to people's heart through her food. She demonstrates how to show kindness to someone in need. We are also pleased to welcome Michael Tweety today, Michael W. Tweety, who will be moderating the event. Michael is culinary historian and National Jewish Book Award winner, and he is the author of Kosher Soul, The Fifth and Fourth Journey of an African American Jew. Please welcome John Nathan and Michael Tweety.
So this is really wild. Lots of different things. I'm a native Washingtonian, so was my late father. I used to come to this building when I was 16 years old with my principal's permission note. I am 47 now. And about 20, I don't even, we should even say the number. It was over years ago. I had a professor through the consortium. I went to Howard University, and I took class in Jewish Studies at American University, and a professor named Pam Nadell. And I said to Dr. Nadell, I said, "Do you know this lady, Joe Nathan?" He said, "Sure, I know Joe Nathan." I said, "What do you want to know?" I said, "I want an introduction." And I probably was 20 years old. Yeah, at least 20 years old, and 1920, and she said, "Sure." And I ended up at Joan's house, and that's how I learned how to make challah. And not just any challah, the best challah, in, like, really. And so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but the reason why I was overjoyed to talk to Joan is not only did she help me out when I was in Philadelphia. I was at the American Jewish Museum, right?
Right.
And it was a big, beautiful crowd. But Joan has been foundational to part of my journey as a food writer and as a Jew, many other ways, and as a person who loves food. And I could not wait to do this interview with you. Yeah, those who know, you know. So we have a lot to talk about. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this work and what it means to you, because you traveled a lot, you've seen a lot, done a lot. I mean, you've worked for Mayor Teddy Kollek. You know, when you admire somebody as an author and as a culinary role model, you learn about everything they do. You get really nosy. You get really, what's the current word, parasocial, about who they are and what they do. And the first question that I'm gonna ask you, we're gonna get the, basic, everything we have to know out of the way, is in looking back on this entire body of work that you produced, both visual and in cookbooks and in demonstrations, what is Jewish food?
Okay. Well, before I answer that, I just want to tell you that the Library of Congress was really my home when I first moved here. I wasn't very happy about leaving Boston. I was happy about being with my husband and whatever we were doing, but I came here when I was researching my second book, The Jewish Holiday Kitchen, and I worked in the Hebraic section with Peggy Perlstein, and I forget his name. Oh my gosh. He was sort of an odd duck, but he was wonderful. Was it Wayne somebody or Myron Weinstein? He was fabulous, and the two of them helped me so much. But what I would do is on my birthday, I would come into the stacks of the Library of Congress and spend a day alone there. And I loved doing that. And it was just my treat, especially when I had little kids, to go there. So it's really has a big place in my heart. And I used to call Peggy, I didn't know you then, Yarm. Whenever I write articles for the New York Times, I would always call her to make sure that I got my facts correct. So I used to call her my secret weapon. Anyway, okay, so what is Jewish food? Well, I think of Jewish food as a definitely dependent on the dietary laws, no question about that. Even if it's just in the back of your head that you really don't follow them, you know about them. And that's what makes Jewish food Jewish. But it's also other things. It's food that has adapted along the lines of kashrut to different locales and different foods. For example, I was in El Salvador, and I had latkes that were yucca latkes with cilantro cream. Well, because yucca grows better there than potatoes, and they were delicious. But that's what because Jews have always had to adapt. The other thing that I do think about with Jewish food is always looking at the properties of food. And Jews always being curious, because Jews were peddlers forever. I just read an amazing book about, I don't know if you saw my article in the New York Times, on a woman named Marina Pinto Kaufman, originally from Tetuan, Morocco, and she grew up in Tangier. And she had the private, I don't know if you have it at the Library of Congress, but if you don't, I'll give you the copy. It's written in 4 languages, a diary of her uncles, great uncles, going from Tetuan to Brazil when the rubber became, when Michelin tires came in and rubber was so important. They went up the Amazon selling things to all the different communities up there, and that's how they made their living. And I realized they did that in Morocco. This woman's father did green tea, would go up to the mountains with green tea and sugar. And of course, they'd add the mint to it. But that's what he sold. And so that Jews have always been merchants. And so that they're always looking for and it actually goes back to King Solomon, because he made people do, what's it called? They give, not money, but give, each tribe of Israel, 12 tribes, had a month that they would give to the temple in Jerusalem. So they would go out on these wooden boats, day boats, Deough or something, and they would learn about this from the Phoenicians. They'd go out looking for food or looking for stones. I mean, there was nothing like computers in those days. They would have all these, they would look what could embellish the temple or embellish their lives or change their lives. And so they've always done that. And that to me is part of food, because it's the way they looked at food.
Right.
That's a long answer, but Jewish answers are always long.
Well, I even say things like, chas v'sholem, bacon is a Jewish food.
Bacon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A relationship to it, even if you're eating in a transgressive way, or you're making things kosher that could taste like bacon, there is still, like you said, I am still breaking down what it is. To me, Jewish food is anything that has a Jewish meaning or context in how you swing it. Coming from New England, nobody knows about Jews from New England.
From New England?
Yes, you're from New England.
I know, I do.
and I find what I find really special about your particular journey is it's not a New York journey, it's not an LA journey, it's not a Miami, it's not a Chicago journey. It's a Rhode Island journey.
American journey.
It's an American journey. But, you know, it's just like when somebody says, I'm Jewish and I'm from Tennessee. Eyes automatically go up and go, oh, I can't place you in my Jewish geography. But in Rhode Island, which has a very old Jewish community, not that your family is necessarily a part of that, but you grew up there.
Right.
And you actually have an artifact from your childhood that you wrote into the book. And I just want to know more about what is it like to grow up Jewish in Rhode Island and what that artifact in your book is about your early childhood experience there.
Okay. Well, I thought you were going to ask a different question about what makes me what I am. But I'm going to just tell you, read this. It's my favorite thing to read from the book. Because when I was writing this book, I found my mother's box of everything every article I had ever written, also all my report cards, everything, all the letters that I had written from Israel, from France, they were all in this box. And one thing I had never seen, and I think it tells me who I am. This is the home report from the 2-year-old group at the Gordon School in Providence, Rhode Island, 1945. Joan has been giving birthday parties for her classmates. She has enjoyed making all the arrangements and carrying them out. On the whole, the children accepted her plans, but sometimes she ran into a snag and had to come up with solutions. She really enjoys her morning lunch. She is quite self-sufficient. She enjoys the routine and is quite happy in her busy little way. I haven't changed. Anyway, you know, of course I didn't realize growing up what it meant to be Jewish in Rhode Island, but I'll tell you, it's not different from many other places in America. In Rhode Island, most of the Jews that came maybe started out in New York and had one relative that was in Rhode Island and came to Rhode Island. Most of them were from Ukraine or near Ukraine. Some of them were from Romania. There's a cookbook that if I knew you were going to ask that question, but they must have it here. It's called, oh my gosh, but it's the Woonsocket Cookbook. And it was written during the war, Second World War. And the women the men were in the war, and the women, the people that wrote the book, went to their homes and watched them cook. And there are all these recipes that I always look at this. It's called Community Cookbook. What else, of course? Whenever I'm looking for old recipes, from this country, I start there. And because it was a small community, Richard Darman, remember him, Secretary of whatever, the Treasury was he? Anyway, he was from that community, was Jewish from that community. Now he says he's Episcopal, but it's his family name right in there. But what it was tight-knit, and that's what the early communities all over the country were. And the recipes, you know, they were stuffed cabbage, but maybe not sweet and sour stuffed cabbage. I've just found all kinds of really interesting recipes from this book. Not my recipes, because my father was German Jewish, and he came 1929 from Germany, so he was like a newcomer, and to Rhode Island. He did not come as an immigrant. I mean, as a refugee. He came first class in the Bremen. He was one of the first people that took the Bremen, the ship, and he came with. A recipe for water repellent fabric, and my family had part of a factory in Rhode Island called Warwick Chemical, and that's what he did when he came over. So it was a totally different immigration. However, what he did was he really loved those recipes of his childhood that were already inscribed in the Settlement Cookbook. So most of the recipes that my mother, who was an American Jew from New York, my father went to, I forget what the place's name, it's in the book. He went to this place to meet women. All the guys from Rhode Island wanted New York girls. So they would go and, and they accepted him, even though he had a German accent. This was before the war. So, and he had a company, so they were very, very nice to him. And a lot of it I learned actually when he died from other people that he had known early on. And they said, well, he kissed women's hands when he met them. And anyway, so he met my mother at this like Marjorie Morningstar type place, and she was there with some friends, and she had been to Europe and he was European, but she was, her parents were from the Lower East Side, but she was smart. She went to Barnard College on scholarship, and they got married. But the point is, she felt, as far as her background, she wanted to be American. And so she would make American Jewish food. And she didn't want to be so much American that we didn't have the background of a Jewish community in Rhode Island. So she'd go to the bakeries that were from that earlier migration, the Eastern European migration. And Rhode Island, again, was a small, they had a conservative and Orthodox and Reform synagogues, but they were a small community within a bigger community, which is what the Jewish community has always been. And so my mother, she would get most of her recipes from the Settlement Cookbook until forever, even when I wrote cookbook. But anyway, and she learned to make the things that my father loved that were German. And that's what made me start to really want to learn about Judaism and Jewish food was, and I wasn't so interested at the beginning in Jewish food. I was interested in ethnic food. So I would go up to Italian Federal Hill. I'd go with my father to my aunt's. He brought his sister over and his parents and went there every Saturday afternoon to listen to the opera and have a good German meal. So I had brains when I was little. I loved them. I don't know how, I'm sure my brothers didn't, they never came with me. Also, they were very much thinner than I was, always. But, they would have Schaller and Weber sausages and, stuffed cabbage really, and lots of baked goods that my aunt would make for Hanukkah, but instead of putting red and green on them, she'd put pink sometimes. And she'd have these cans of cookies, of German cookies, in the breezeway, so that, again, my family had lived in Germany since the 8th century. So they came over because of the Holocaust, but, that's what they always ate. And what's so interesting is I was just with a cousin. Should I keep going on?
Yes.
Okay. A cousin of mine from Germany who is 1/4 Jewish. So some of these recipes he kind of knew, but because his mother wasn't Jewish, and it was during he grew up after the war, I guess. Everything, you didn't eat Jewish food, but when my book came out, he made the sweet and sour, it was carp, but it was salmon in my book, which is one of my favorite books. It's got ginger snaps in it. And I realized that maybe the way that and he made it in Germany, and he thought, oh my God, it's so good. He had never had it. So that food is always changing, but there's some things that never change.
When you talk about that, I think that a lot of people assume there will always be somebody to remember a recipe, or because it's written down and digitized. That's not true. You have to do in order to preserve. You can't just think about it, because eventually what happens is the ingredients get lost, the techniques get lost, the flavors and the smells get lost, to the point where there's this scene, but this moment in what is the book? I can see the cover in my head. And Miriam's Kitchen, where she's talking to her mother-in-law, and she says, I found the mushrooms you used to eat in Poland. and they get the mushrooms, and they look the part, but when they make the dish, it doesn't taste right. And German Jewish food is an endangered part of the Jewish diaspora. People assume it was all the same. Not at all. German food was different from Austro-Hungarian food, and even that is broken into multiple parts. So when one of the most amazing things that we have to give you credit for is reintroducing us to the power of community cooking. You go in your books, you go into communities. On your show, you preserved customs that are documented nowhere else. For example, the Passover documentary, and I knew all these people from Magen David. Bipilu, the custom of, the Seder plate above the head during the Seder. Y'all like, what? Yeah, and the leeks, and everybody knows the leeks and the scallions now. But those other customs, those songs, if you don't record them and don't see them, and they're a part of our food lore, does that excite you? Does that give you, what does that do to your heart to see those things preserved?
First of all, Passover, where's Gail? Gail's family was in my Passover Traditions of Freedom. Yep. And, just when you were saying that, I thought, oh, my God. I mean, I would love to have that resurrected. It was on PBS, 13 years? And my TV series was on more, let's say 15, because it's not lucky number 13. But it was a long time. Those are the things that really excite me more than anything. And just last week when I did this article on this woman, Marina Kaufman, who, before it went to press, called me and said, I don't want you to write the article. And I thought, so I never do this, but I read her the entire article, and she realized she was going to be okay. But anyway, she was very anxious. But when I was doing research for this article, I looked at this one Moroccan cookbook I really like. I had written the article in Martha's Vineyard, and then I came home, and I just had a little bit of time, and I looked in this a book from the 80s, and I forget what it's called, but I'm sure you know it. But anyway, I think they mentioned it in the article. Anyway, it said that this recipe that I was writing about, which was 7 foods for Rosh Hashanah, 7 good luck number, and that were basically boiled and then then served with sugar and a little bit of cinnamon. Anyway, and people do it differently, but she was from Tangier, so this woman did it, Tangier, Tetuan, that's what her it was the one thing that she did. But what in this book said was usually this was served with the head of a calf and boiled for 3 or 4 hours. And I got so excited because I realized how, and other people have just put the head of the sheep or whatever, or the fish for the new year. And it's in different customs. And I realized how customs change, how as our tastes change, as our whatever. But nobody does that anymore. And it was like, oh, this was a good luck dish. And I got really excited because I had found something that people we just hadn't thought about. But unfortunately, they didn't let me, they included it. I don't know how many people realized what I realized, that this is what it was once, but it is no longer because we've changed.
Right. This book I have this word called food steps to kind of like bridge together our footsteps and our foodways and all of that. And as I was going through my life and recipes, and I don't know if I should bring this up, but I should bring it up maybe.
Yeah, you can. Whatever.
One of the most endearing parts about this book is you documenting your love story with your husband. May he rest in peace. And also the growth of your children. And I don't want to center that because I feel like one of the big mistakes I made with my mother was not my mother. My mother was her own woman, her own girl, her own teenager, her own daughter, her own person. And that's what we always do, right? This is my mom. No, this is Patricia Townsend. This is not my mom. Yeah, she's my mother. I'm not here without her, right? But you know, that kind of thing. And I didn't want to do that. But at the same point in time, you put at the front not only your professional journeys, but your familial journeys. And how did you go about selecting what those food steps were going to be? I mean, the recipes, of course, you can always tie a memory to a food or a moment, but also just that whole process. This is not an easy book to write.
No, it's not easy. All right, well, first of all, every step of the way was not easy. Started it, I was supposed to start it before the pandemic, and then my husband got sick. He had Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and I'd never even heard of it before he had it, and they said, you know, he will die within a year. Well, it took him 3 months, that's all. I think he knew something was going to happen, and knowing him, anyway. So I had, you know, and I had read John, I mean, nothing was just, everything took a long time. It took a long time, first of all, just to go through all that I had, and then to put it in years, and then sort of outline what I wanted to say. And my editor actually had to cut 30,000 words. And she said, sometimes I've told people that they're in the book and then they're not in the book. But anyway, and then, so we did that, and then, you know, I had to think, she said, food is the essential of this book, but everything else, the way, you know, I like stories, and then I wanted to involve my family in it. So I read, just after Alan died, I read Joan Didion's, the book that she wrote after her husband died. And hers was like for those of you who've read it, it was a repetition over and over again. It was sort of like Kaddish in a way. And that's what mourning is. You know, you go over everything. And I thought, that's not what I want to do. I want to include him in what I'm writing about life. And so what I did was I decided I would just write. And I got up very early in the morning, and I love to write in bed. Do you like to write in bed? Yeah. So I would write in bed, and I just wrote. And then a lot of it I did in New Orleans, where my daughter was. In fact, she wrote a modern love piece on it because she thought we would last together for 5 days, and I stayed there for 50-some days. Anyway, and I wrote, and then I walked, and then I went back and I wanted to make sure that I was correct, and, you know, that I didn't make any mistakes. So a lot of it meant calling the Library of Congress, calling different people, looking at things that I'd written, looking at the files that I'd put together of all of my articles and all of the letters, you know, especially the nasty letters. I loved keeping those letters. I always do. So, you know, and when I started writing for the New York Times, if you get originally, they don't do this anymore because Sue's on the phone. If you made a mistake, and it would show up on your phone 11111 the day that the article came out, my heart would sink. Anyway, so there had been this one article that I wrote, and then I thought, what would be fun to write? You know, I wanted to write this, not only what my life was like, but sort of the behind the scenes of being a food writer. So I wrote this after 9/11. They, for some reason, were not going to write anything for Rosh Hashanah. They forgot about it. So the editor called me and asked, this is like Monday, and Rosh Hashanah was Wednesday or something like that. And I said, well, I have these gorgeous challahs coming out of the oven. If you can send a photographer over, I'll write about the meaning of making bread. So I did. So everybody, these were gorgeous challahs. And what happened was, in those days, you'd call your article into the Times if you weren't in the newsroom, because it wasn't before computers, but that was anyway. And also, water was not it still is not an ingredient. Anyway, somebody on the other end made a mistake. So everybody was making my challah. And I got all these letters, all these phone calls about, it was like the Valdez oil spill. And so I saved all those. So I put them in the book because I thought people would like to read about it. And then I realized what happened. The person who accepted whatever I did, she put the amount of water as oil and a tiny bit of oil, water. Anyway, so I was lucky because they had the photographs twice. They put them in twice of the challahs. But the other thing was, we were invited to the Israeli ambassadors for Rosh Hashanah, and I said, I remember two things. One was I had promised my older daughter who was coming home that I wouldn't do anything on food writing for the holiday, so that we could just have a holiday. And then here was this thing, and it was, so I said, look, my daughter's coming home from school. I don't want to have anyone calling me from the Times, except from then on, it's the holiday. And then I knew we were going to go to the Israeli ambassadors. And I remember the one thing that I learned that night was that they put a date on everybody's plate. We don't usually do that as the new fruit of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's, so I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to dote on my children, but I made sure that the equal amount of times I mentioned each child, and of course. But so I wanted to talk about my life, and I think I did a good job of that.
We think so. It's because people think that writing a book is like writing a dissertation, and then the worst question you can ever ask an author is, especially with cookbooks or food books, is, "Are you done yet? How's the book coming?" It's like gestation. You would never say, "Have the toes formed yet?" It's just it's just let it happen. Let them do what they got to do, and when it's done, it's done. Don't bother me.
Right.
Don't get on my case. And then, of course, cookbooks are not remunerative.
That's true, too.
People need to understand it. Just because you have notoriety does not mean that cookbook is like your everything. No, there's a reason why, especially now, she can tell you more than I can how that's changed.
Very different.
Cooking on TV, doing demos, doing talks, that's your bread and butter. Not that book. That book is basically your excuse to be on a stage. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but I do want to ask about your Washingtonianness. Okay. Because this is a very special place. And I don't think people realize how special it is who come from off.
Right.
And how has it shaped your culinary life and the opportunities you've been able to experience in this work?
Well, and actually, one thing that's been really helpful to me has been that people are from everywhere. Mm-hmm. And when they learn that you write about food, and especially Jewish food, if they're Jewish, or, just stories. I mean, I love writing stories. They they tell you about their relatives, they tell you about where they're from, and so I've gotten so many, especially when I wrote Jewish Holiday Kitchen, not only from Magen David, I went there when they had their, fairs or whatever, and I met all the women. This was 1977 when I was pregnant with Daniela, and I met Annie Toda, I met and I met this, who was the woman, Gail, that I met? She was Moroccan, and she had no children. and she was a great cook. But this one woman, I'll think of it in a second, she had no children, and she wanted to give me recipes. And these are really, really good recipes. And that book is still in print now it's called Joan Nathan's Jewish Holiday Cookbook. But since 1979. So that I realized that there were these little pockets of Jews, even in Washington, but not as old. Much of it started post-war. But then there were some, like the Hechinger family. Early on, I got their matzah ball recipe where you broke up the matzahs. And that's pre-matzah meal. You broke up the matzah, you sauteed some onion, you put with egg and there, and that was what my family did in Germany.
Right.
And they were what I found out that family was friendly with my family in Germany, and the reason I knew it was, and I can't find this, I don't know what happened to it. I have the list of gifts that my grandparents got when they got married in Germany, and there were a lot of Hechingers that gave them from Hechingen, which is where they were from. And then when I was testing sweet and sour tongue, John Hechinger Jr., this was I went to a potluck at Sidwell Friends, and John was the only one besides me that liked the sweet and sour tongue because it was the same recipe both families had from Germany. I mean, so that's pretty interesting.
I mean, it's also a city of embassies and the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress and other and academic institutions and cultural institutions.
It's a great place to live.
Yeah, and to learn from. I mean, I just thought about this the day ago. I said, had I grown up in the Rust Belt, like many of my cousins as a part of the Great Migration, not the same opportunity, not the same exposure.
It's true.
You can go to free museums here, whereas if you're in Chicago and you're living in primarily neighborhoods of color, you got to cross all these rivers and pay all this money to go to institutions that I used to go to. Remember when the Metro was under $1? Right? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so,
but you were unusual.
Yes, I was unusual. But my parents were tired of taking me to the museum. They would like, okay, look, the minute you turn 13, here is the $5. You have nothing more to spend than $5. You go to the museum, you come back home, be home before the lights come back on, and that's it. And I got an education that way. What's your favorite recipes in this book?
Well, I do like that sweet and sour salmon. It's really lovely. I love my arugula recipe,
Okay.
which is from Canada. Again, we were wandering around Montreal. Somebody said to go to this kosher baker, and the baker had worked in San Francisco. And they said, you're going to love the arugula. And I thought, oh my God, this is the best arugula I ever tasted. So I asked him for the recipe, and he said, oh, well, I'll tell you what's in it, but I won't give you the recipe. And I realized it's just the simple, cream cheese, dough. And then I figured it out. And
So Montreal has something good they can share with the rest of us.
yeah, and so, you never, it's like going fishing, writing cookbooks. Don't you think? You never know what you're going to, what's going to be good. And I remember going, well, not in this book, but even in this book, going in France, in Bordeaux, and I was at a rabbi's, what do you call it? The rabbi that went over what took care of the kosher. I wanted to do kosher wine, and I wanted to see the process. And it turns out that this rabbi, who didn't want me to have anything to do with what he was doing, had gone to Annecy in France. And my family, the Most family, were the family that got that brought all the North Africans to the community to Annecy, and that he had a crush on my cousin. So this guy, I said, well, do you know the Most family? He said, oh, come for Shabbat. So I went to his house, and this woman made the most delicious challah that I'd ever had. And now my challah always has anise in it, which is what she did. And then I asked her, I asked them, would this woman let me come to her house? And this is like, French is a much more closed society than ours is. And they said, no, she'll never let you. She did. So it was 7 flights of stairs, and I thought, how can she climb with all that she's got to? Anyway, she made the challah for the Jewish community, and she made it in a very easy way that it took 45 minutes, basically, from start to finish. And it was delicious, and it was, I'll never forget, that I went there. But you really have to push yourself. You can't do all these things on the phone. You got to get out there.
No, you have to go there. You have to watch people's hands, not their faces. People think that they're these armchair anthropologists with their smartphones. This doesn't work. Hey, Joe, Nathan, show me how to make this thing. Nope. You have to look at what are they buying from the market. You have to feel the ingredients in your hands. You've done all this, community to community. And, we applaud you for it because there's a lot of figureheads in the food game, and the majority of them. But as far as Jewish community life, it's more for for us, it's more than just food. It's, like we were discussing before you arrived, it's memory. It's bringing people back that we've lost. It's looking forward. It's acknowledging that this recipe will be given to a great-grandchild.
Right.
It's personal. Remembering who you are, who you've been, who you're going to be. And it's more than just that. It's our collective survival. Without that, we're nothing.
And especially, during this very difficult time, food has become so important to the Jewish community, but also to the Arab community.
Yes.
And just, I'm part of something called Foodish, which is with the ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv, and they've gone out to older people since October 7th and gotten all these old recipes, and it's just something that helps nourish you.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, before we do whatever, I know we have questions from the audience.
We hope.
What you got? No testimonies. Now, I know I'm the only person who comes from I might not be the only person, who comes from an Afro-Baptist origin. But questions particularly about my life and recipes.
No questions? Come on, there'll be questions.
They got questions, trust me.
Oh, there's one. Okay.
Just need a microphone. Yeah, we got you.
Can you speak a little more about your favorite Sephardic recipes? Which ones you like the best, and maybe a story about how you got them?
Okay, well, I love Sephardic food, and there's a Sephardic fish recipe that has been in one family, the Corcos family, in Spain and wherever. It's a big Sephardic family. And by the way, there's this guy that I know that's doing the DNA of Sephardic males. And so he's been able to tell throughout history, because I guess I don't understand any of this stuff, but you can do it better through males and females. So he's told me where to go for these recipes. But anyway, it's just it's a simple Moroccan fish recipe for Friday night, but you can see how some more sophisticated recipes have certain things like preserved lemon in it and olives, and some don't. There's certain spices that are different, but it's pretty much the same recipe. That I like very, very much. I also like all the Sephardic salads. I think about them, at the beginning of, always for me, for Rosh Hashanah, I'll have several. I have the roasted pepper salad. I'll have the carrot salad. I don't know, actually this year I had a bok choy salad from my garden in Martha's Vineyard. But, and that, by the way, was eaten before anything else. Beet salads, all these Sephardic, because you can make them ahead. And, and Sephardic salad, Sephardic housewife, you always have to have at least 2 kinds of eggplant, one boiled and then one fried. You just have to have 2. So you have at least 12 different salads that are just delicious. And of course, this vegetable salad dish that I made for Rosh Hashanah is also with different kinds of carrots and zucchini, and it just depends again where somebody's been, but the number 7 is always there. Dates it might have in it, raisins. That doesn't have pomegranate. Well, maybe it does have pomegranates in it. Yeah, so he's, and sometimes they're separately. Yeah, he's from a Moroccan family. I love adafina, which is like the Sephardic cholent, really. It's a Sabbath dish. I like feijoadas. I don't know, I like loads of Sephardic dishes. And these are all Rosh Hashanah dishes. I like good Jewish food. I don't like bad Jewish food. Yeah.
I hadn't really eaten shakshuka until I was in Israel, but I wonder if it's sort of like what happens with hummus, like where its origins are and where it's come, and what is your favorite, and what are the different types as far as shakshuka, and like I said, where did you see it coming from?
It's Libyan shakshuka. Which is not Sephardic, because Sephardic really means it's from Spain. So what?
It's Maghrebi.
Yeah, and it's North African. That's what shakshuka. Okay. Right. Okay. Good. Okay. Good. And actually, it comes from Arabic, and basically the story is, according to Nawal Nasrallah. Do you know her? She's a wonderful Iraqi food historian, and she told me that in Libya, women that had an affair with somebody and had to cook something quick for dinner, made shakshuka, because you just put egg and a tomato sauce, and that's the origin of it. Now, I don't know if it really is, but that's what she says.
So where does the green shakshuka come from?
But but now it's part of what is considered Israeli cuisine. Shakshuka, mafroum, which is another Libyan dish. It's potatoes and meat. And it's sort of like there's certain things that like hummus, and all of them come from different places. And of course, just getting to hummus, let me just say that hummus is one of the oldest foods known to mankind. And they've traced it, chickpeas, back like 5,000, 6,000 years. And it's of the land, and it's in the Bible. It was written in biblical Hebrew as like it said that it was vinegar. And where's Yoram? He just, but there was in the Bible. There's a story about a shepherd in a field, and he had his servants. The workers, and he gave them bread, and it said he had something like hita that they served them this for for dinner, for lunch, and they translate it as vinegar. But the biblical word for chickpeas is the same word. And if you served a worker vinegar and bread and you want him to go back into the fields, you're crazy. So it was hummus. And hummus, if you go to Akko or you go to the old city of Jerusalem, there are all these places where they only sell hummus and bread. And you realize that workers would go there for breakfast for hundreds of years, and because it would fill them up. And it's the oldest protein known to mankind, and it's going to be the newest protein. There's such a demand for chickpeas. On the one hand, people like it. There's a lot more vegetarianism because there has to be. It requires very little water, and it can come to fruition in 32 days. So it's really going to be the food of the future.
Also, I tell people all the time, hummus is nonpartisan. It is a food that was invented by a woman who was pre-Judaism, pre-Islam,
No
who had
question.
hungry kids and wanted them to shut up and go to bed. She took the chickpeas, the garlic, and the olives and said, here, take this. Y'all can eat this. So, like most foods, it's our mothers, our mitochondrial mothers, who never get the credit.
Right.
Or Brunswick stew is not some dude in the woods. Brunswick stew is a Native American woman. And Southern food, you don't have to go there with me. So, that's the point of it. And I think right now what we're dealing with is a lot of tug of war over not ownership of food, but, where the food comes from. And I think those stories, I think it was you that told me one time that, people think, just because a dish is Moroccan and Jewish, that it's the same dish that you eat if you're Berber, or if you eat another part of the Moroccan community. It's not necessarily the same dish. It's been adapted. They may contain a similar pattern, but it's not exactly the exact same copy. But I say that because sometimes people will be like, oh, you guys, you know who they mean by you, the theys. You took this from us, you take everything and you don't have any culture of your own. Well, when you're living in the same area of the world for thousands of years, and you're marrying, and you're fighting, and you're trading, and you're exchanging ideas, and how can you not eventually share good things that are exciting and beautiful and lovely with each other, despite the political effects of it? It's a very deep part of the story that is very present on social media now.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
But I don't even pay attention to social media. I just. But actually, hummus was originally with chickpeas. Sesame came from China. We have to realize that and all these ingredients came much earlier than people realize, like eggplant. I think that there's a lot more going on in the Mediterranean than we ever thought, because they found China from China in Cyprus way earlier than they ever expected to. So if they found that, there's going to be other things that are going back.
Things from Africa and all over.
Right. So some hummus with tahina came later.
Wow. One last question. Sir. Yep, that's you.
So I've recently inherited a bunch of recipes from relatives in Hungary that were handwritten in books.
Beautiful.
Translating them, and even actually just trying to determine the handwriting, and just to even get the individual words. I'm just wondering how, because I can't imagine you haven't run across this yourself and you found recipes from different places, and how would you go about translating them and getting them so that you can actually work with them again? Like Michael said, they're dead on the page until I actually can work with them. I'm a chef, so it's something that I really look forward to wanting to get my hands into and to be really.
So are you Hungarian?
Yeah.
So what he said is, and it's a really good question, that he found some recipes in Hungarian, and it's a big problem. I'll tell you why, because the way that they wrote them is very people can't read that writing anymore. And I have the same problem. I have about 6 German cookbooks from my family in handwritten, and I've found the Leo Beck Institute, and they have been helpful to me because I really want to. If I kept saying I'm not going to do another book, but maybe I will do something on German Jews. We'll see. But anyway, so I don't think I want to, but anyway, maybe. But so and even in cookbooks, there are different generations of writing, and people cannot read it. So there must be, go to the Library of Congress. They'll tell you who is the person that will, in whichever division, one of you will know. The European division, they will know somebody who's really good at, at Hungarian recipes, but it's hard, it's exciting, it's important. And you might find little things in there, like I found in one of the books. It's in all these stories are in this book. But when I wanted to learn some of the German cookbooks that I'd gotten one cookbook, somebody called me. This was before cell phone, but there were answering machines in those days, and she said, "I'm getting ready to die. My husband, who's already dead, had these cookbooks, and they were by Trude Lehmann, and Trude Nathan Lehmann." And I thought, that's my aunt. And she said, I thought, she must have known about me from my TV show. And so she sent this beautiful cookbook, actually the best of all of them that I have. And I found it said things like, "Left for America" in there, early, left for America. So you can learn a lot more than just the food from these cookbooks. And, but they're a puzzle. And, keep persevering. Maybe you'll find some great recipes. Anyway, and I just wanted to tell you that I do have a few cookbooks if anybody wants to buy them here. Just 2, actually, but I have some in the car. So.
I want to thank you for this opportunity.
This is fun.
I'll never forget this. Never forget this. This lady and Marcy Cohen Ferris one day, I'll never forget this. We got to end on this little story. This is before a smartphone, before flip phone, cell phones, period. And I'm habitually late for everything. I was early today. And Joan said to me, "Look, I have to pick her up and pick you up from the metro. If you were late, this ain't happening. We are leaving without you." And I was there, and that day changed my life because Marcy was there at the Hadassah chapter in DC, talking about, you both gave a talk, and yours was about Jewish food history, and Marcy's was about Southern Jewish food. And I'm sitting in the back, rapt attention, like, wow. And I thought to myself, I can actually do this for a living. Sort of a living. No, look, I've been on this hustle for a long time, so yes, ma'am. And I said, these ladies had taught me a lot, and one day I said, I got to do this. And without that, I would never have the path that I have. And not just that, but for my ancestors. Wow. That they're in this work every day. So on behalf of them, I thank you. On behalf of our whole community, we thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much. And I want to mention that hummus is supposed to be warm, not from the refrigerator.
And it's supposed to have garlic in it.
Okay, so I would like to thank John Nathan and Michael Tweety for this fabulous event. We at the Library of Congress so grateful to you. And thank you to everyone who came out to join us today. I would like to thank the Library of Congress staff for helping with this event, Sharon, Gail, Brian, and everybody. So thank you very much.